So thanks so much for coming along today, especially as a few people have pointed out, I'm competing with the footy and a beautiful day outside, so I'll keep it fairly brief. Also thanks to Felicity and the Art Collective for letting me show in this beautiful space, and also to Jo Lam, who unfortunately isn't here, the other artist I'm exhibiting with, and congratulations on her beautiful show. Jo, I think Jo and Felicity maybe thought of the idea of us two showing together, which at first may not have seemed the most ideal combination, but in fact we seem to have a lot in common. And near the end of the exhibition, we met up. Near the end of completing the work, and I saw this rainbow in Jo's work, and I said, "Yeah, this is gonna look really good together." And we said, "Well, we'll just say we constructed it all like that, and it was deliberate." But it was a nice combination. These works, my works are on this wall and that wall there. Probably the result of about 8 months of work, just working solely on these paintings, and. I started off by making mock-ups to paint for my paintings, which were what these two paintings. These aren't the original ones. The original ones were done quite quickly with house paint from a hardware shop. And I went and it was just fun to sort of think about things differently. And I chose the three brightest primary colours, which I'd never use. They were like a bright magenta, a kind of cad yellow and a turquoise blue, and I thought I'm going to do the classic mixed three colours because I've never done that in a painting, and I thought it would just be fun. So the colours were mixed just using those three colours, and I played around with them, and I guess at the time I was thinking of the minimalist painters, Stella and Dan Flavin's light works. Oddly, because I've worked in art collections a long time and sort of lived with those sort of works for a while, and I thought it'd be just nice to have these things around, not necessarily as artworks, but things that you kind of interact with or make all the light in the room change colour, or so more sort of things that would accompany the works that I was going to do. But when I completed them, I actually kind of liked them, and then people were coming to the studio saying, "I like these," and I thought, well, they sort of formed a de facto relationship with the representational paintings. I thought I might as well redo them as with proper materials. So these have got all dupes in the studio, which is kind of weird. And they kind of, as I put them together, I have fun like putting two near identical paintings next to each other. But these are done with artist quality materials. And at first I thought this is going to be great. They're going to look better, and because the colours are brighter. But when I used the artist quality paints, there was something very hard about them, because the house paints have got lots of white and filler and stuff in them. They had this lovely soft quality. So it took a long time. That's the time in these things, was just getting them back to that kind of feeling of the sort of house paint, the sort of nice softness, the domestic kind of colours of it. So these have got lots and lots of layers, as you can see. So they're not sort of like perfect in that sense that you can sort of see little bits of where I've changed the colour. Some of them would have up to six layers until I got them somewhere where I wanted. I was most fussy about greens, because I find green is a really difficult colour to get a colour a kind of chroma that I feel happy, it sits there and it does the right thing. So I was looking around for good greens like the transperth green, and that's a good one, and then trying to bring that into what I was doing. So I was in Sydney last year, and I saw two big Frank Stellas in the gallery at Art Gallery of New South Wales, and my reaction was more like, I'd love to paint these, rather than, and so I was looking at it, because they're very large. I was looking at them sideways, thinking, wouldn't that be just brilliant to draw that and to look at the light on it and so on. So when I came back to Perth, I thought about how I might be able to do that, and this is sort of the result of that. Let me see. From sort of working with art, so I sort of lived with a Dan Flavin for about 12 years. I'd look at it every day, and I kind of was interested in a private art collection, in what was happening with that, and somehow processing that and turning it into some sort of artwork. I find sort of Dan Flavin really interesting from a distance, the way it fills the room and what it does, but I thought of this something that Roy Church has said about photography, controversial subjects, that he finds it interesting and stimulating, so do I. When you get close to it, there's none of the personality of the artist there, so it's like it's a mechanical image, and you become very aware of that. And I found that true of the Flavin too, that you get close to it, then all you just hear the 50 hertz hum of the tube and the light. So it doesn't work like a painting close-up. So I was sort of doing my equivalent of that with painting. The other thing was these colour sequences come from several sources, but mainly from the designs of Polaroid film packs from the 70s. When I was 12 years old, I had a Polaroid camera which I loved, and take photographs and you peel it apart and you watch the image emerge and the colours and stuff. And so basically I thought, because the designer, though I don't know, must have looked at Stella to produce these things. So I was very familiar with the kind of the layers of the scale of colouring that they used in it. I changed it to sort of suit myself. It's not like a Warhol, like a Brillo box, in that it doesn't have the label and I don't refer to it, but it was definitely an inspiration and a reference, though I couldn't find one and I couldn't find particularly good images of them. The thing that I've just said the W word, Warhol there, and the thing I often think about him that's really interesting is that he did those Brillo paintings, and the paintings themselves the design was done by a painter. I'm just trying to think, James Harvey, who was an abstract expressionist, who was working as a designer part-time so he could pay for his painting career like we all do. And it was kind of very ironic that Warhol took those images and turned them into famous fine art images when they're actually designed by an artist to begin with. So I thought that was an interesting kind of connection with using a design, a second-hand design thing in these works. Warhol's an artist. I mean, I like it, but I'm sort of ambivalent about it. I like the holistic artist, the kind of the way he just takes on anything he liked, or did take on anything like the way he supported the Velvet Underground particularly, and all those sorts of things. But then again, I feel with his work there's a sort of the detachment lacks vulnerability. You don't have nothing's put at risk in terms of personal terms. It's always cool and it's always distant. So that's that aspect that I feel this push and pull about. But I'm always sort of he's kind of everywhere and he's so important and referred to. Which is why I did some paintings which were shown here of Warhol paintings. So I got permission to go into a private art collection, which I was working at, but I got permission to paint these works. So I had the walls of Warhol, and then there was just me with my easel doing a live, from life, the paintings of the Warhol paintings. And that was an interesting experience because as an artist in Perth, you feel kind of disempowered by international contemporary art. You're just this small figure, and there are these giants that you can't take on. So I felt like I was getting some sort of revenge in a way. I was putting Warhol into my frame, and I could then and appreciate it on my terms. So I felt there was an interesting process going on there. So it was that sort of led to the idea of doing some more works based on that experience of an art collection. I wonder if I've jumped around here. Now, the other thing about Warhol that's important today is that the first exhibition he had, which was the solo in '62, the show caused a lot of effect. It caused a big ripple, but I think he only sold one or two paintings. He sold one to Dennis Hopper, the actor, and the dealer said, "Look, I'd rather you didn't buy that. I'd rather keep the work together." So there were no sales ultimately. So that sort of humanises Warhol again in an interesting sort of way. So there you go. Now, let me see. The collection pictures. I guess, the art collection thing is another thing, because that basically, apart from some teaching, been my part-time job for about 30 years, and I've worked in art collections, here in Perth and in Sydney, and so that sort of really gotten into my system, and so that sort of also meant that it's affected how I see things at home. Like I realised I had an art collection at home and kind of fussy about where I put things in the house and have the lights falling on them and so on. And in a way, I'm not working in an art collection anymore at the moment. It's quite good because I got too obsessed with, going to gallery and looking at up there instead of there. So it's nice to be re-engaged with the works for the way you're meant to see them as a member of the audience. So the art collection pictures were really interesting because they were about that part of my life. So here we go. And there were several artists that I thought of that paint art galleries that were relevant to me. One was Joe Lamb, who did a lovely painting I saw on the web of the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and it has that English painter, the sea hath its pearls, and you can just see it reduced down to a few marks, and I thought that was very nice. Stuart McFarlane, a painter I really like, he's done some interesting gallery paintings, and so has Jeffrey Smart. So I was thinking of all those people when I thought I'm going to do my take on this when I started it. Now, so there's some of the background, a bit more like background with this stuff is minimalism, and it has always fascinated me. In fact, when I went to Sydney to study, everyone there was interested in Neo Geo. It was the early 90s, and so I was a real fish out of water, but I was living with those artists and looking at what they were looking at. It was quite interesting. So, and one of the paintings I did from that time, which is Red Room Bondi Junction, which is in the University of UWA collection, actually is influenced by Rothko, so it's got that simple big masses of red, and then the figure coming into it. So that's a painting from '92. Then more recently, although one of my bosses, John String, was obsessed with minimalism, so I also was slowly processing what he was saying about it. And more recently, I noticed, which we all would have, is that the way buildings are in Perth, they seem to mimic minimalist paintings. And I noticed one down the road from us in Osborne Park. It looked like a Mondrian painting, so I became very interested in that. Then I went down and set up my easel and started painting this painting. So I borrowed from the Mondrian title, which is Broadway Boogie Woogie. I call it Osborne Park Jazz, to sort of reference that feeling of minimalism in our lives and in our suburbs. So I'm sort of not. It's not something that's necessarily a passion. It's more an interest. So it's like it's everywhere. The dominance of IKEA and that 1920s Bauhaus design seems to be like that's good design, and so that's what we all think about. So I started to work through it and process it, and then the same way I sort of was looking at Warhol, like this, how does this connect with me and what I'm doing? Okay, now I think I pointed out that I like to paint from life, and that means setting up my easel somewhere and looking at something rather than working from 2D sources. And I find that very exciting to do that. It's like I also play music in a band called Diode, and it's a lot more like a live performance because you're on. Your time starts, the light's moving, and you go, and something happens in that time. You've got more intensely concentrated focus, and then it stops because the light changes and you can't do that anymore. And that's how this painting came about. I was looking at these two paintings. This is inside my studio, and about 4 o'clock, the light would start tracking across the paintings like that. So I made a drawing of it first, just so I could lock all the things into place. And it's also quite distorted, so some of the perspective is a little strange in it, but because it's such a wide space, and I drew it, straightened everything up, the curves are gone, so it's a little sort of elongated in the moment. But I actually did like that. So that's how I painted this, was waiting for the right time of day. But I also, sometimes it can be frustrating working from life because you're sort of waiting for that moment to come. It's like, I guess, waiting around for a film shoot or something. So what do you do for the rest of the day? And I had these things to layer and work on. So they were a nice complement. In the morning I'd work on those, getting the colours right in those paintings, and then in the afternoon when everything happened, the light would come across like this. Actually, someone pointed out they connect to some paintings I showed at the gallery just a couple of years ago. Which were about light coming through a prism and affecting the still life. It was the same sort of thing. I was, fascinated by what happens to light. I always have been through a prism, and then painting that in a live mode. And so this is basically how that painting came about. So when I finished that one, I felt like I needed one more work, I think one more representational work to complete this. And so that's when I started this painting over here. Now this one, it's got some real artworks. This is a lithograph by John Beard, and this is a Tom Moore.